A few weeks ago I was talking to Karina and I said to her, give me some ideas for a sermon. And she was so helpful. She said, just go and pray about it. I said, thanks. I wanted some actual thoughts, And so I started thinking and something came to my mind and I've used that as the thoughts for today anyway. And we've moved just recently, as most of you know. We've moved from High Street to the country. We've gone to Cranebrook, and any of you that have been out there know that it is basically where we are. It is very countrified. And one of the things that I've liked about moving there is the fact that we've been able to start a garden. And hence the hymn we just sang a minute ago, I come to the garden alone. And it's good as we've started this garden, just walking out of a morning and seeing what's happening. It's right near as you walk in, you've got to walk past it to get to where we're living. And you can check the garden as you walk past, and you see the plants growing and growing and growing. And it's great. We went out this morning early and we just went around and checked, and plants that seemed to be about this big a couple of days ago are now up like this, and it's great watching them grow. And I guess for me there was memories coming back of being at home, because I was raised on a farm, and Dad had a market garden, and there was always plenty of hard work to do, which are the memories I don't really like, although I don't think it did me any harm. But the memories were there of gardening and getting out and spending long hours in the garden itself. And so that's what has formed the ideas of this sermon this morning. Just before we begin, let's just bow for a moment of prayer. Our Heavenly Father, we want to just put aside all our earthly cares and worries this morning and come in here and be shut in with you for just a few moments as we study the things that are prepared for us, that we will gain an insight into you and what you want us to do and how you want us to live our lives, we ask in your name. Amen. I'm working with a new computer and a new gadget which I've never used before, so we're hoping it goes fine, and I'm sure it will. If not, Adam's got to come and fix it for me. Nature finds abundant illustrations of law counteracting the working of law. If there be a law of nature which is universal, it is surely gravitation. Hold something up, drop it, and it falls. Stones never rise into the air by themselves unless a force superior to gravitation lifts them. Have you ever seen a stone just fly? Well, I have. But there's usually something that's caused it, like a car or a truck or somebody throwing it. And it is thrown into the air by a force. They alight again as soon as the force is spent, which threw them up. So they don't go far and they fall back to the ground again, gravitation. But look at the trees, how they persist, in spite of the law of gravitation, in lifting themselves up out of the earth, holding themselves perpendicular and throwing out branches skyward in great freedom. To the stones who do not know the secret, it is a perfect miracle that the trees lift themselves towards heaven and make such a flourish of their liberty. Bury a pebble and it will obey the law of gravitation forever. What happens though when you bury an acorn? It will obey a higher law, and that law is in itself. Is the law of gravitation suspended just because the tree is rising? Never for a moment. But in the buried acorn and the buried wheat corn and so on, there is a vital force which is superior to the attraction of the earth. Just a few interesting thoughts. And this morning I want to continue on a little bit further with this. Jesus said, I am the vine. Just those few words. What else can you think of that Jesus said he was? If we looked in Matthew 11:29, he talks about, I am a gentle and humble in heart. The different things that he said he is. In Matthew 20 and verse 15, I am generous. Matthew 22 and 32, I am the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. All the different things that Jesus said he was. John 6 and verse 35, I am the bread of life. John 8 and verse 12, I am the light of the world. John 8 and verse 23, I am from above. John 10 and verse 9, I am the gate. And verse 11, I am the good shepherd. And for a good many years we have wondered why Christ mixed his figures of speech in his parable of the good shepherd. At one place he calls himself the shepherd, and at another he calls himself the door. A recent book explains it beautifully. It says, a traveller in Palestine once had a conversation with a shepherd at work near the sheepfold, who showed him the various features of the fold. Thereupon the traveller remarked, "You say, here is the sheepfold, there are the sheep, and this is the doorway. But where is the door?" "The door," asked the shepherd. "I am the door. I lie across the entrance at night. No sheep can pass out, no wolf can come in, except over my body." Beautiful, is it not? Christ did not mix his figures of speech after all. He is both the shepherd and the door. What else did he say he was? John 11 and verse 25, "I am the resurrection and the life." John 14 and 6, "I am the way, the truth and the life." And we could go on, the different things that Jesus said he was. But today we want to focus more on just "I am the vine" and we are the branches. Thinking about branches. Why do trees need branches? You ever thought about it? Why? When we were still living in High Street, I had a neighbour who wanted us to cut down our big tree. Those of you that have been to our place know the big gum tree we had in the backyard. And there was one branch was overhanging the neighbour's property, and he came to us time and time again and wanted it cut down, wanted it to trim that branch off. And I said to him, "Well, it's up to council. If they say yes, it's okay, then maybe we can do it." And when the man from council came out and he looked at it, he looked at this one limb growing out that was over this guy's place. And he said, "Okay, if we cut that branch off, what's going to happen to the tree? You know, it's balanced. This limb goes down, it's going to be unbalanced." And I hadn't thought of it before, but those limbs actually balance the tree up. And he said, if we take that off, we get a strong wind, it'll be overbalanced and it may even get blown over. The other thing, he said, it might send out another limb to replace that one with, and that won't be as strong as the original, and that could get blown down in a storm as well. So trees need branches to keep them balanced. They carry the life from the tree itself to the leaves, to the fruit and so on of the tree. They also supply shelter and a place for birds to build their nests. And we used to love watching the birds. That's one thing that we will miss a little. We made friends with our little peewees and our woolly wagtails that used to come and build their nests in the big tree. And it was interesting watching them, and they'd get quite tame and come quite close to you. There is a story which says up in Hamilton, Ontario, the workmen were trimming some trees. On a low-hanging limb, which was to be cut off, they found a bird's nest with young birds in it. The workmen were troubled. Some of them insisted that the limb must come down, while others pleaded that it be left until their next trip, when the birds probably would have gone. After some discussion, the limb was left. Some months later, when the tree trimmers came again and cut off the limb, and the nest was torn up, they noticed a little piece of paper which had been woven into the nest itself. They examined it and found it had been taken from a Sunday school paper. On it were these words, "We trust in the Lord." Isn't that amazing? You see, they just could not have destroyed that little home under any circumstances. Branches, they're all different, aren't they? Think about it. We have different shapes and sizes. We have big fat branches, we have little skinny branches. Some branches bear fruit. Some are big and fat, which I've just said, and some are small and frail. But they're all different. Some are green and living. Some are barren and bare. We look at them and we think the tree is dead. But realistically, it's not dead. The life-giving force is still within that tree, and just through winter it looks as though it's dead, but it comes back to life again at the end. The life that's in it is internal. We can learn a lesson there, can't we? Some branches, they look very icy and cold. I don't know if you can see it, but that's actually ice on there, I think. I didn't take the picture, so I don't really know. But yes, they're icy and cold. And they look bleak. They are affected by the influences of outside influences. And sometimes these outside influences on these branches do actually kill the trees themselves. Some are lush and alive. Some are interesting. Some are transparent. Some are burnt out and dead. Some are intricate and cold. Just like the branches, people are all different as well. As we look around this morning, I don't see two people identical in this church. Do we have any twins here, just by the way? No? Even with twins, they're never quite exactly the same, are they? We have identical twins, but they're not quite the same either. There's usually some little feature that is a little different. But people are all different. Some people, when we look at them and meet them, we find are lively and animated. Do we know people like this? Yes? You always know when they're around. I'm trying to think of an example, but I don't want to embarrass anybody. But you know the sort of people I mean, you know? They're the life of the party. They're out there. As soon as you get to church, you know they're there. They're usually fun-loving, and we refer to them as extroverts. They're always out there talking with people. Do you know people like that? Yes. I see Heather nodding her head because, yes, okay. Some people we find are interesting and different. Now, different is not a bad thing, but people are all interesting and different, or some people are very much different. Might be in the way they look, might be in the way they act, might be in the way they think, but they are different. They're interesting to listen to. You may find them very interesting because they're on the same wavelength. Different people that I talk to, I find very interesting. Somebody else will say, oh, but they're a boring person. But because I'm on the same wavelength, I find them interesting. They might be different because they don't focus on themselves. Quite often when we're talking to people, it's all about me, and these people are different because they're not focusing on themselves. There can be many reasons why people are different. Some people we talk to are transparent. You can see right through them. You know that they're hiding something. They're trying to hide something, but you can see right through that. They're predictable, and I guess those of us that are parents know about how the dad jokes. You know, your kids get sick of them. They can see right through you. They know what you're going to say. Yet you talk to other kids and they think these jokes are quite funny. So you know what I mean. We're different. They're transparent. Sometimes these people are very shallow. There's no substance to them. Maybe there are other reasons why they are this way. Sometimes we notice that people are different because they are burnt out. Anybody feel like that? It's getting close to that time of the year when we're all feeling a bit weary, and it's just one of those things, isn't it? This time of the year we do feel a bit worn out. These people they're always on the go. They haven't learnt to say no. And it's all right to say no. Some years ago I was with a group of people down at the Chinese church, and they told me how a previous person that was teaching this class that I was involved in came in to make a point one morning, and all they did was write 2 words up on the board, and that was what they discussed for their whole session. And they had 2 words, or 3 words: know, your no. K-N-O-W, your N-O. How many of us have learnt to know our no? How many of us find it okay to say no when we're asked to do something that we really don't have the time or the energy to do? Some people are just icy and cold people, and there could be reasons for this. Some people are very complex. They're deep thinkers. Sometimes they're too brainy for their own good. You know, you've met these people who are so brainy in their field, that's all they can talk about, and they know everything about that field, and that's not a bad thing in itself. But you know people like this. They're complex, they're deep thinkers. Let's have a look at a couple of Bible verses here. Talking about people being different. In Psalms, and I'm reading from a distance here, Psalms 139 and verse 14. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Do you feel you're fearfully and wonderfully made this morning? Each of us is. We're all different and we're all fearfully and wonderfully made. How can God do that? Make so many people all different, yet we're all so fearfully and wonderfully made. In 1 Corinthians 12, 29 to 30, it's talking about spiritual gifts here. Are all apostles? Are all prophets? Are all teachers? Do all work miracles? Do all have gifts of healing? Do all speak with tongues? Do all interpret? No, we are all different. We have our different roles to fulfill, don't we? We are all different. We can't all be the preacher up the front. We can't all be the camera operator. We can't all be the person sitting behind that desk up there where Adam is. I can't do his job. I wouldn't know where to start with it. We are all different. We all have our different jobs to do. 1 Corinthians 12, 14 and 15. Now the body is not made up of one part, but of many. If the foot should say, because I am not the hand, I do not belong to the body, it would not for that reason cease to be part of the body, would it? So every part of the body has its foot, and it's referring to this as the body of Christ. We all are different, we all have our parts to play. Thinking about these spiritual gifts, what is the purpose that we have these spiritual gifts? Why do we have them? What's the reason that we have spiritual gifts? Why is the church given gifts, or why has God, the Holy Spirit, given gifts to the different church members? Why? What are they for? Okay, 1 Corinthians, even so since you are zealous for spiritual gifts, let it be for the edification of what? The church. For outreach or for the church? For the church. They're given for the benefit of the church. First Corinthians 14 and 26. What then shall we say, brothers? When you come together, everyone has a hymn or a word of instruction, and so on. All of those must be done for the strengthening or the edifying of the church. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we don't have to be out there as well, and I'm very proud of the fact that our church is very out there orientated. But never forget that we have a work to do within our church as well. We are told to go into all the world and preach the word. We need to do that, sure. But when we look closely, and this only came to me in the last few days, that realistically these gifts are given for the benefit of the church itself. He himself gave some to be apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers for the equipping of the saints. Where do we find the saints? Out there or in here? The saints for the working of ministry, for the edifying of the body of Christ. Very important to understand that we know that these gifts are for us here. We have a tremendous outreach program in this church, and I'm proud of that. We need it. But what are we doing on a church level for looking after our own church folk and lifting up and building up our own church? We all have our part to play. A well-known conductor was holding a rehearsal one night with a vast array of musicians and a 100-voice choir. While the mighty chorus sang out, there was also the peal of organ, blare of horns and clashing of cymbals. Far back in the orchestra, the piccolo player thought, in all this noise, it doesn't really matter what I do. So he stopped playing. Suddenly the conductor flung up his hands, stopping the music. Someone he knew had failed to play his instrument. The shrill note of the piccolo had been missed. Just as many notes are needed to make a tune and many colours are needed to make a painting or a rainbow, so many gifts are essential for the functioning of the body of Christ or the church. We can all do something. Do you feel that? Do you feel does anybody sitting in this church feel they can't do anything? That's great. Why do we have so much trouble with the nominating committee this year then? Sorry. In Argentina, everyone is required by law to spend 2 years in the military service. One fellow showed up at the induction centre objecting. What good would I be? I have no arms. They put him in the army anyway. At basic training camp, his commanding officer said, "See that fellow up there on the hill pumping water? Go tell him when the pail is full. You see, he's blind." Both men are needed in order to get the job done properly. and here in the church. We need the outreach, but we need the inreach as well to get the job done properly. It doesn't matter how small and insignificant our gift or our role seems to be. It's very important in the way the church functions, and we need everybody to function within the church. A talented organist in the days before motor-driven electronic organs gave a very magnificent concert. Now, you all know big pipe organs and how you just turn them on now and the bellows and they pump the air up and away they go. But in the days before power, they used to have a buoy and you pump the bellows. And I don't know, some of you that are older and been in some of the bigger churches may be aware of it. I've never seen it, but I'm told they pump the bellows. This guy gave a magnificent concert in which the big pipes set forth glorious, thunderous tones. After people finished congratulating him, the little boy, who had worked with all his might at the bellows, remarked, "We did pretty well, didn't we?" The organist scornfully replied, "And what did you do?" He gave the boy no credit at all. A month later, during another concert, the organist came to a stormy passage that required all the wind of which the bellows were capable. Suddenly the organ began to fade. No air, no music. The organist signalled for more wind. Instead, the little boy pulled aside the curtain where he was and he said, "Is it I or is it we?" And it's so true, isn't it? In the church, it's not I doing it, it's not you doing it, it needs to be us doing it together, all working together. The verse says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." If a man remain in me, he will produce much fruit. S.D. Gordon tells of a spring storm that broke a large limb on his cherry tree. Although it hung by a very slender strand, to his surprise, the blossoms came anyway. Later, some fruit began to grow as it did on the other branches. He noticed, however, that only those in full contact with the tree bore much fruit, while the partially severed branch produced only a scanty supply. As believers, we must be careful about our spiritual connections, making sure we are fully abiding in Christ. The fruit we bear, whether much or little, tells the story itself. And the interesting thing is, too, that we all do produce fruit. And we can get hung up, well, you know, they're producing more fruit than I am, they're doing more than I am. No, we all do our little part and we will all bear fruit. The fruit that we bear will be the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness and temperance. I want you to look at these verses with me, because this is an illustration, or it's almost like a parable, which is quite interesting when we analyse it. And it's talking about a wild olive tree. I don't know much about olives. I don't even like olives. I can stand them on pizza if they're chopped up pretty fine, but I don't like them. But anyway, if some of the branches have been broken off and you, though a wild olive shoot, have been grafted in among the others and now share in the nourishing sap from the olive root, do not boast over those branches. If you do, consider this: you do not support the root, but the root supports you. We don't support Christ. Christ supports us. You will say then, branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in, and there's a lot more in this story which we won't go into. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but be afraid. For if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God. Sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his goodness. Otherwise you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in. For God is able to graft them in again. After all, if you were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature and contrary to nature, were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? What's interesting about these verses? There is some interesting things in here. let me tell you a bit of a story here. And this is some of the memories that came back to me. When I was very young, I was very small actually when this took place. At the side of our house we had a big old peach tree. Now these pictures aren't of the trees, but they're very similar to what they looked like. Old, didn't look much, a few blossoms here and there. And Dad had done everything he could to try and get these trees to produce fruit, but they were old, half dead, not bearing much fruit at all. And we had a friend down in the town. We used to go Sabbath afternoon, we'd either go bushwalking or we'd walk through the bush and end up on the beach, and we'd walk back home again. And as we did, we'd made friends with this old gentleman, and we'd sit there talking on his front veranda. His front veranda actually was his side veranda, but it was his front veranda as well. And you'd look out over his little plot there, and he had these trees that were growing up, and they were big trees, fruit trees. And Dad said to him one day, look, I'd like to prune those for you. Now, Dad was an orchardist. He grew up on an orchard, knew a lot about it. And he said, I'd like to prune those for you. Oh, it's no point. Don't even worry about it. It's not worth the effort. The trees have had it, tiny little fruit on them. Dad knew enough about the trees to know what type of fruit they were and what type of plums they were. And he said, look, what I'll do, I'll prune them for you, provided I can have some of the wood to take home with me. Now, as a little fellow, I thought, why does he need that? What does he want to take that home for? And so the old boy agreed. And Dad pruned his trees, and that season, his trees produced so much fruit, he was overwhelmed by it. Beautiful, beautiful it was. But getting back to the old peach tree we had, Dad said, I'm going to try one last thing with these trees before I get rid of them. And this is a bit like what some of the trees were looking like. They were overgrown, they were old, they were no good. And so he said he was going to graft them. Now, I didn't have a clue what grafting was or anything about it. But he said he was going to do it. And I remember watching with interest as a child, watching how he did this and watching the results of it. And he used, and I'm going to show you a picture in a moment, of some tools that are used for actually grafting. They just look like pocket knives, don't they? But you'll notice that they're just a little bit different. See the little bump? And this one here is a little bit different as well. And I've actually got my dad's here with me. Look at it. Isn't it wonderful? Now, I feel great that I can hang on to this, because as a child, I wasn't even allowed to touch it. Not even allowed to touch it. This, I've got to say, is very sharp, and Dad used to keep it very sharp, and that's why as kids we weren't allowed to touch it. But apart from that, it was something that had to be used for a purpose. There it is. It's falling apart in places, but it's great to be able to just hold on to it now. I'm not a kid anymore, see, I can hold on to it. And so these are some of the tools that are used in the grafting or budding itself. How is it done? Do any of you know how to graft or bud a tree? No? I was hoping to be able to find some trees and actually show you how it's done. Is there anyone here that has ever budded or grafted a tree? Yeah, I thought you might. I better be careful what I say now, hey? It's quite interesting though, isn't it, Trace? You do it and then you watch it grow. And you start off with making a little mark like that in your tree. And there's two ways you can do it. There's budding or there's grafting. Now, this here is going to be budded, and this here is a graft. And on these trees that I was talking about that Dad had, he used both systems. This one here, you cut the limb off, you put a little cut through it, you get the good wood that Dad had carried home with him, and you cut that, you put it in, and then he packed it with clay, and you had some stuff mixed up that he packed it all with to keep it there until it would grow. The other way is like this, where you cut that in and it's called budding, and you take a little bud off here, or there it is there, and you slip it in, then bind it up like that, and you leave it to grow. This is what he did with these trees. Press the right button, it might work. And what you do is you select your bud very carefully and prepare it like there, so that you can put it in to the little nick you've got there and so on. And then this is just an actual picture of what is happening after it's started to grow, and that's the way that the grafting itself is done. It wasn't long when Dad did this to his trees that the tree started looking a little bit like this. They were well pruned, the tree had grown and sprouted these out, and it's interesting when you do this that one of two things can happen when you bud or graft a tree. Either it grows or it falls out. Is there a lesson there for us? We'd read before about being grafted into, and we need to be grafted into Christ. We can either grow with Christ or we can fall away from Christ. And how disappointing it is sometimes when you set that graft and it starts to grow and then it falls out. The tree rejects it for some reason. It wasn't long after he did that instead of having no fruit, we had fruit. And I've got to do a bit of bragging here. I've got to do a bit of skiting because these plums, I have never seen plums like them. I do have a picture at home somewhere, but in the move I can't find it. But you normally think of plums about that big. These plums we packed in a box and we sat a ruler across them and we photographed it. 4 inches across. 4 inches across. And you think, okay, that's fair enough, they've probably got a big seeding. Tiny little seed about the size of your thumbnail. Juicy. Who's hungry? They were beautiful. And all of that from basically a dead tree that is no good, producing this beautiful fruit that we would put them in the local show and win prize after prize with them. They were that good. And I'm using that as an illustration from something that's dead and no good to something that is really, really good. And there's a mystery that we read about before, or we'll read it again here, in Romans 11:24. For if you were cut out of the olive tree, which is wild by nature, and were grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these, who are natural branches, be grafted into their own olive? And the interesting thing is this here, the olive tree which was wild by nature was grafted contrary. What did we do? What did my dad do with these trees? He took an old tree that was no good, and he grafted something good into it, and it was good. But what's this talking about? We're talking about something contrary to nature. Talking about something totally contrary to nature, where we are taking the stock, or we're taking the wood that is no good and put into the tree that is good. Let me explain it. This is the mystery. In nature, we have an old stock, and quite often, Trace, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you want to get a nice plum tree, you don't put a seed in the ground and grow it. Doesn't work. You get a peach tree, a seedling peach, which won't come to any good, but you plant it. When it grows, you graft or bud into that what you need. And so we take the old stock, we put a good branch into it, and we get good fruit. But spiritually, what do? From those verses we just read, we have a good stock, which is Jesus. We take the wild branches, which is sinful man, you and I, and we end up with good fruit, or much fruit, as the Bible says. If a man remains in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. And it's interesting that the buds that are grafted in can do nothing of themselves, nothing at all. They can't do anything about where they're going to end up. They're just nourished by the sap, and then they grow. Jesus said, "Then shall you know that I am he, and that I do nothing of myself." It's the same with us. We can do nothing without God or Jesus with us. I mentioned before about the special tools that we use, and there's other tools as well, but what about the tools that God uses in his dealings with us? What would you say are some of the tools that he uses? I'd like to suggest that they are things like acceptance, forgiveness, salvation, trials, hardships. Think about this little illustration. A bar of iron worth about $2, when wrought in, and this is probably a few years old, but you get the idea. When wrought into horseshoes is worth maybe $4. If made into needles, it is worth probably $140. If it's made into knife blades, it's probably worth about $1,300. If into springs for watches, which we probably don't have many springs in watches today, probably worth about $100,000. What a drilling the poor bar must undergo to be worth this. Think about what has to happen to that bar of metal. It has to go through the fire. It's beaten and it's pounded and polished with with greater, and the greater the value, it's pounded and polished, the greater its value. Those who suffer most are capable of yielding most, and it is through pain that God is getting the most out of us for his glory and the blessing of others. So these trials that come to us, yes, they're hard to bear. Of course they are. But realistically, it's the way God is shaping us and using them to shape us. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. Keep that thought in mind. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. He is pruning us. He is dealing with us. While every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it will be even more fruitful. So let us praise God sometimes. Not always easy to do, is it? But God is doing it for a reason. And sometimes we can't see the reason behind it. Many things happen, we can't see the reason behind it. But God is using it to build our characters for us. So how do we become part of that true vine? And just an interesting thought, when I was putting this together, I thought, if there's a true vine, is there a false vine? Which vine do we want to be grafted or budded into? The true vine or the false vine? I showed you this little illustration before, and we started off to do this budding by putting a cross, and look what happens with it. Do you get the picture? It's when we come to the cross, we can look at this budding in the way of coming to the cross. And when we do come to the cross, when we let ourselves be grafted into Christ himself, we come to him, and it's then that we start to produce the fruit. We grow and we mature in Christ, and we produce the fruit itself. The fruit we bear is all different. Like I said before, we are all different, and the things we do are all different. And that's fine. Accept that. Accept that somebody else is not going to think and do exactly what I do. And it all matures at different times. We are all at different stages. It's like being on a journey. We are not all at the same. If we're going from here to Brisbane, we're not all at the same place at the same time. We're all in different places and different stages. No two pieces of fruit are identical. We are all different. As we've thought about this morning, my prayer is that we will recognise the difference, that we will see in people the difference, that we'll understand them differently, that we'll accept people for who they are and where they are. They mightn't think as we do, they mightn't agree with what we agree with, but they are working in God's vineyard the same as you and I. I'd like to just share a short poem to finish with, and it's written by, I don't even know the person, Alice Bennett, and it goes like this. I have no voice for singing, I cannot make a speech. I have no gift for music, I know I cannot teach. I am no good at leading, I cannot organise, and anything I write would never win a prize. But at roll call at meetings, I always answer here. When others are performing, I lend a listening ear. After the program's over, I praise its every part. My words are not to flatter, I mean it from the heart. It seems my only talent is neither big nor rare, just to listen and encourage and to fill a vacant chair. But all the gifted people could not so brightly shine, were it not for those who use a talent such as mine. May God bless us each this morning.